The Stockpile by Andy Slater, presented by the Sonic Mountain Library of Sound and the Electronic Arts Library 2008 to 2017 EB63HL. Approximate reading time 35 minutes. This book contains markers allowing direct access to table of contents, chapters, and sound glossary, library annotation. Excerpts from the novel, The Stockpile, have been edited into a non-linear reading format. Chapters that serve as exposition have been deleted from the playing device. Chapters that may conclude any part of the story, including the ending, have also been deleted. Information is not always important. 3 folders on this device have been designated to this piece. Folder 1 contains the story's chapters and folder 2 contains sounds from the book. The 3rd folder has been left empty for each reader to contribute their own chapters or sounds. Please note, any content found in folder 3 has not been produced by the author. Folder 1, Table of Contents, Introduction. Chapter 2, Stealing for the Greater Good. Chapter 4, Off the Grid at Absence. Chapter 6, A Voice on the Wires. Chapter 9, Dummy Cube. Chapter 10, Back from Extinction. Chapter 11, The Flies and the Clams. Chapter 13, Tub 62. Chapter 15, The Doctor and the Puppet and Their Secret. Chapter 18, Acid Pony. Chapter 24, A Changed Man. Folder 2, Sound Glossary 1, Inside the Compound 2, Waves of Pressure 3, Survey, The Pond at Night 4, Dripping Tub 5, Acid Pony 6, Theme Music.
The breaking up of the United States was traumatic for everyone, even the moral meddlers who perpetuated its demise. Religion and money had trumped science, and those of us who thought critically about anything were left to suffer while the end times leaders committed suicide in a synchronized offing. I for one was happy to see them go. They destroyed where I lived, they destroyed democracy, and they put every single American on a pathway to death. The money was stolen. The budget was cut. The infrastructure was non-existent. They truly destroyed our nation, awaiting the return of their savior. 10 years went by and there was no rapture. The end-timers then decided to take the money they had embezzled and feed hemlock to their followers. They were to take their show to God himself. They gathered at some location in Dover, there were millions of them, and ate some drug that killed them all, proving that it was truly a suicide cult. With science programs defunded, the CDC stopped researching what was happening to the Great Lakes. For years the lakes had been breeding organisms predatory to humans. These things were collectively called Ipswich, or the Red Switch. An Ipswich is a piss clam. It squirts when you open it. It is not native to fresh water, so no one knows how they got into the lakes. Instead of water, the Red Switch spat some kind of protective acid, a virus or poison. No one is really sure, since the specialists researching the epidemic were killed. The Ipswich quickly mutated and grew in size. They looked like a purple flower with 7 petals and welled on the surface of the lakes, like algae. These things began to fly. Some fishermen claimed to have seen them hop off the water and into their boats. They would spray the people and then hop back into the water. I had seen some crude video of these attacks, but don't remember exactly what happened. When someone was squirted, they died. It looked to me like that they disintegrated. The common assumption was that their insides burst, all of their insides, whatever it is that lies in your guts. I never saw any sign of that. I never saw any bile, plasma, juice or anything leak from a victim, and I have seen over a dozen. So, like many people, I had to go by my own conclusion as to what happened, because there was no one left to tell the truth. The lakes were so contaminated with Ipswich that the Canadian government took it upon themselves to drain the lakes and burn whatever they found. The public was told that the problem was solved. The remains of the red switches were incinerated and buried deep in the Arizona deserts. This does not explain why I am currently employed to transport 10,000 gallons of this rot from Powell Ends to Dover. I am part of a small team trying to safely destroy the remaining tubs. Each tub contains red switch water, the same water that the Canadian PM said was dehydrated. It is not an easy feeling moving this stuff around. It is even less easy knowing that there are numerous state factions and crazies looking to dump it all back into the water supply. My name is Carlton Desmond and I was born in Detroit in 2021. The year is 2053. Chapter 2: Stealing for the Greater Good. Steve, I can't tell you how impressed I am with the new project. Thanks, Doctor. Now if only I can find the funding to finish it. Steve looked at me. Dr. Lupes looked at me. I don't have any money, I exclaimed. They continued to stare at me, and I'm certainly not going to steal it, I said. Still staring, I turned my back. Look, last time I did anything like that I was in my 20s and I'm really ashamed of it. I am not going to hold anyone up. Who said anything about holding anyone up? Asked Steve. Well, what are you talking about? I asked, turning to him. We're not asking you to hold up some bluegrass fiddle player on the corner like you did when you were younger. How did you know about that? I leaned into him. We have files on you, remember? You've done a lot of things to be ashamed of. Steve replied. The doctor stepped to me. He peered over the rim of his glasses. He packed his pipe, lit a match, and puffed in my face. Son, what we have here is something that is so incredible, so tremendous that it will change the way we think about time itself. We are in need of millions of dollars. Rolling some mark on the street isn't going to fund this project. Rolling some mark, really? I asked snidely. Steve put his bag down and grabbed my shoulder. You know how to access the system, right? Yes, I replied. You know how to move the money around, right? Yes, but you know how to make it look like a computer error, right? Yeah, but no buts. You have to do this. We are years away from understanding the OS. It's second nature to you. I looked at my feet. He was right. What do you say? Asked the doctor, drawing from his pipe. Put the damn pipe away and I'll think about it. Dr. Lupos smiled and then left the room. Steve picked up his bag and hugged me. I looked away. Man, this is going to change the world, he said. I said I'd think about it, and I don't want you to bother me for a few days until I have made my decision. I said, this is going to make us famous in the eyes of the scientific community for years to come. Steve, I said I would think about it. Don't get too carried away and don't spend any of your money until I'm ready. Think about it, man. Kids will be reading about us in their school books. There will be specials on TV about us. We will win awards. People will, hey, come to us for future projects. Books will, hey, I yelled, grabbing him by the collar. There are no school books. History gets rewritten all the time, but not to the benefit of us. There are no scientists. They're all gone. But there are still people in power that need to know about what we're doing. He argued. The only ones with any political pull hate science. Have you not been paying attention? We don't belong anymore. Unless what you're doing is going to help us fight back, then it's going to be hard for me to care. Even if the money is significant. I screamed. I let go of his shirt. I paused. Steve looked at me expecting more ranting. I looked at the floor and then at Steve. I made up my mind. His eyes lit up. And? What is it? He asked. I'll tell you tomorrow. I walked out of the room, past the doctor's office. Did you decide, young man? He shouted as I passed his door. I said, put the pipe away, doctor, and walked out the door. There was no way I was going to let the suicidal cult revivalists control science. Chapter 4: Off the Grid at Aspens. After leaving Stephen the annoying doctor, I headed to visit my old friend, Aspen Kildare. He had a way of surrounding himself with young rebellious state smashers. Just the kind of people needed for this felony. The day outside was awful. Showered in what seemed to be a rain of glue, I stepped out of the open air and onto the platform. Aspen greeted me with a smile and a shake. In his 60s, slouched over, and wearing white to match his beard, he pulled a cigarette holder. Chapter 4 Off the Grid at Aspen's. After leaving Stephen the annoying doctor, I headed to visit my old friend, Aspen Kildare. He had a way of surrounding himself with young rebellious state smashers. Just the kind of people needed for this felony. The day outside was awful. Showered in what seemed to be a rain of glue, I stepped out of the open air and onto the platform. Aspen greeted me with a smile and a shake. In his 60s, slouched over, and wearing white to match his beard, he pulled a cigarette holder from his coat pocket. "Do you want to smoke? You can smoke here." "He should know I don't ever smoke." "No, you should know I don't ever smoke." "Fine, I have apple juice." He smiled. He handed me a plastic thermos. I pulled from it like it was sweet brandy. I love apple juice, and with the way I drink it, I'm surprised I don't sweat it from my pores. "Should we get inside?" I asked between gulps. "Follow me, this rain is thick and sticky, I hate it." I followed him through the door. It was dark. I waited for him to power on the light, and soon the intense hum of blue fluorescence started drilling my brain. I squinted and grabbed for my glasses. "Sorry for the lights. It takes 5 minutes for the generator to kick in, then we can, turn the real one on," Aspen said as he took his coat and scarf off. "Why do you need a whole generator to power one lamp?" I asked, following with more apple juice. Aspen looked at me like I should have known the answer. "You do realize that the government cuts our power once they see we're using it?" He replied. "I did not know that. What the hell is that about?" "There's a lot of reasons for it, you'll find out soon enough." He grinned and sat down. The generator started to howl like a praying owl. It was a hideous sound. I covered my ears, and when it stopped screeching, the lamp turned on. Aspen got up and hit the light switch, shutting off the fluorescence. I could finally clear my ears and open my eyes. "Do you like the lamp?" he asked. I looked up at it as it stood over me. It had a 40-watt bulb and didn't make me squint. Of course I liked it, but I know he was referring to the sculpture it was growing out of. "It's nice, kind of decayed looking." "What's it made of?" "Rock." "Oh. Dave made it." Dave was a long-haired 20-year-old tech wizard who lived there. He was a board-certified electrician as well as a dynamite sculptor, meaning he blew up rocks with TNT and then turned it into art. "Brilliant kid. Go ahead and touch the lamp, it's warm." "Warm?" I asked. I reached over and put my hand on the base of the lamp. It was very comforting. I kept my hand there. "It will heat the whole room in a few minutes," Aspen stated. "So that's why it needs a generator." I said, "Yes, and when it gets hotter, the gen gets louder. We will probably want to go into the other room or I won't be able to focus." In an hour the lamp will safely heat the whole house. This is the kind of technology Dave has mastered. I don't know anyone with his level of knowledge. "Tech wizard, makes me feel like his apprentice," said Aspen. "That kid is amazing," I stated, trying to figure out how the whole thing worked. "He is currently out blowing up some boulders to make a cooling device for the summer," Aspen bragged. "Christ," I said under my breath. "He'll definitely be helpful." Aspen nodded. We sat there in silence for another 5 minutes. My eyes were finally adjusting to the room. There were a few things I hadn't noticed when the overhead lights were on. A purple tapestry on the wall that had a kind of Persian design. A spittoon that looked overused. A huge wine bottle filled with seashells. A large piece of driftwood whittled in the shape of a musket. A bowl of dried leaves. I broke the silence. "This place looks like an old man lives here." Aspen laughed. "But what about this?" he said, waving his hand at his left. A large mound of multicolored dust, looking like a pile of smashed dragon's eye marbles collected on the floor. "What is it?" I asked. "Ground up spices." "Really? I don't smell anything." "What kind of spices?" I asked. "It is something that Gina did. She found an old notebook of her uncle's declaring this as a vaccine for the red switch. We've all ingested it, hoping it works. Not sure why it's in this room though." "Piss clam voodoo?" I chuckled. "Better not let her hear you say that," Aspen warned. Gina was a dark-haired Midwest girl. When I met her I was unable to speak. Too pretty, too strong, too smart for me to even think around. She has a cosmic side to her. She maps energy in people, claiming that I had a leader's drive but that I should see a specialist about my stuttering problem. I never had that issue until I met her. The generator went back to its shrieking game. "Let's head into the other room," Aspen said, standing and grabbing his coat. I stood and passed by the lamp. I could only get about 3 feet away from it before getting nervous. "We will tell Dave and Gina about the new job," Aspen said. "Maxwell isn't going to like it though." "Who is Maxwell?" I asked, shutting the door.
Chapter 6. A Voice on the Wires.
Repent and you shall be free, 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 repent and you shall be free. God is watching, repent and you shall be free, repent and you shall be free, repent and you shall be free, repent and you shall be free. God is all knowing.
Chapter 9. Dummy Cube. Dave brought a metal box into the break room. It was purple with a few computer ports, some other unfamiliar ports, and a strip of disintegrating masking tape with the word "Dangers" scribbled on it. "Dangers?" I asked him while inspecting the box. "Dangers but not dangerous," Dave replied with a grin. "This is it? This is the database Steve and the doctor have been looking for?" I charged. "Yes, and it's been in Aspen's storage the whole time." Dave spun the box around. "Do these ports look familiar?" I looked the panel up and down, pointing at each one as I defined them. "BNC, RCA, S-video. That's odd, excuse. I paused. "Dave, is this a video switcher or a server?" Dave lifts the panel up and opens the box. "It's a dummy." He took a hand-sized yellow cube out of the purple box's innards and hands it to me. My eyes lit up. "It's a fucking compact flash drive." Dave nodded and wheeled the computer over to the table. He snatched the drive from my hands. He opened the back of the computer, blew away some dust, and casually dropped the drive in it. "This is the missing link, Carrollton. We have spent a year trying to build this computer, finding parts in Hollandia, Dover, and even Moscow. A decade before the break data and computer companies began trademarking and licensing their products, there was no compatibility between any third-party tech or older models. Open source was no more. Computers and storage devices were equipped with kill switches that would shut down and erase if there was evidence of hacking. This was a result of deregulation and paranoia lobbied for by the suicide cult. There was suspicion that chip makers were loading viruses into their products during manufacturing, and a few other red herrings that forced people to give up and give in exclusively to one brand, one computer. Laws were then passed mandating the destruction of older and vulnerable computers. Schools, thrift stores, and citizens were given vouchers for new computers in exchange for the unsafe ones. They were essentially gone forever. We gave up at least a dozen times, and now we were going to watch this piece of antiquated crap come to life. I said nothing as Dave powered it up. The projection screen blinked for about a minute. I stayed calm. Dave tapped his feet, breathing heavily through his nose. The computer beeped and the drive spun. "Good signs, Carrollton. Good signs," shouted Dave. It booted up. The desktop wallpaper showed a flamingo on the beach. The drive revealed itself as "Dangers to the mission." Dave and I looked at each other. He smiled and then clicked on the folder. 100,000 documents inside folders and subfolders and sub-subfolders, all titled as last name, first name. "Okomeye, Harold?" I asked. Dave nodded and clicked the file. Up popped a 12-page document on Dr. Harold Okomeye. The first pages listed his info and vitals, but the remainder of the file consisted of notes on his personal life, his friends and allies, family, work history, critiques of his research, and finally comments on how he is a danger to the mission. We had found an agency database of everyone deemed to be trouble. The drive was filled with doctors, professors, scientists, protesters, assemblymen, members of Congress, and businessmen. Search my name, I told Dave. Mason, Carol Khan. Open it, I said, walking to the projection screen. There I was in plain sight. Everything I ever did. The good stuff, the bad stuff, and the stuff that made me dangerous. Carrie Hunt, you dated Softband Field? Yes, I answered. The model? Whoa, yes, Dave. And if you look below that, you'll see that I killed a Metro cop when I was 17.
Chapter 10, Back from Extinction. A pair of kids came our way a month or so ago, Thurman and Kyria. We found them wandering around like they were on drugs. They kept talking about Cheshire being a ghost town and Olympia being a battleground. The boy was skinny and looked like Jason Middlebrook. The girl was tall and soft and looked like Maxine Castle Road. When they came down off their trip, they admitted that they were runaways. Her family are deceased cult members and his are gun-hoarding survivalists. They knew of the brutal hell their families went through and wanted everything to do with stopping the further decline of our country. We took them in. They've been doing a lot of soil work out near the water and claim to have sighted red switches. We didn't believe them, so we went out with a camera and hazard suits. Sure enough, they were right. This shit was supposed to be extinct. Kyria yelled, running back to the compound. Thurman looked at me and Gina, excited and scared. Therm, as long as you wear your suit and stay 100 yards from the water, you will not get hurt, Gina assured him. I kinda wanna see what happens if I get closer, Thurman said with a cracked smile. No, I grunted. You do not go near that shit. You will contaminate us all. Okay, I won't, but I really want to see what they'll do. Do they really hop and spit acid? Gina grabbed his arm and pulled him back to the building. They spit whatever it is they spit, and it's dangerous. It will kill you and mostly likely everyone in the compound. The two walked by me as I stared at the shallow lake, panning the camera back and forth waiting for something to happen. A gull flew too low and up popped 3M switch and disintegrated the bird. I was able to capture it on video. Now I can show Tharm just how fatal these things can be. I handled my radio and called for Carlton. Hey, got some bad news. The kids found clams in the lake. The other end was silent. Chapter 11, The Flies and the Clams. After the kids told us about the clams in the pond, I began to secretly monitor the situation. I couldn't find any reason why the red switch were showing up now, but I was witness to the immediate effect they had on the ecosystem. The clams were now disintegrating their prey. With one spray, falcons, raccoons, even deer were gone. Fizz, I've never seen anything like it, neither had Carlton. I showed him the footage of the gull. After a long silence he spoke. We may have to get out of here, Dave. It was night and the rest of the group was asleep. Although we never leave the compound after dusk for fear of things we imagined were waiting for us. I took Carlton to the water. Dressed in our safety suits, wielding night vision scopes, and my camera, we approached the shore. The water was still and the area was quiet. A fox walked to the edge of the pond and stuck its nose in the water. The clams, dwelling on the surface, hopped and spat. The fox crumbled, leaving bits of fur and bone where it stood. Suddenly the air filled with a tremendous buzzing. From out of the trees came a swarm of giant flies, dozens of them. Holy shit, yelled Carlton as we stood watching them pick at the fox's remains. I set the video camera down, aimed at the flies, and we ran back into the compound. We really need to leave, I said breathlessly. At daybreak, Carlton and I went back to retrieve the camera. The flies were gone and the clams were floating far from the bank. I bent to grab the camera, battery dead and covered in sand, and we ran back through the gates and behind the steel doors. We locked ourselves in the break room and charged up the camera. Projecting the fuzzy infrared footage, we saw the clams and flies teem to destroy all matter of life throughout the night. The footage stopped in the middle of the bugs scavenging the dust of a small bear. We stood in silence inches from the screen. The projector cast the electric blue menu screen. Carlton turned and half whispered his plan. We'll watch this afternoon. If those flies show up, we'll know that it's unsafe to be out there at all. I can only hope that they're nocturnal, I whispered back. They look like overstuffed scaz flies to me. Scaz was Aspen's folksy name for mosquitoes. I rewound the tape to an arbitrary point and selected the inverse color function. Some flies got close enough to the camera for us to make out their features. They were definitely some kind of bloodsucker.
Chapter 13, Tub 62. I leaned into the microphone. Tub 62 is missing. Report to the loading dock. With everyone gathered around, I paced before them. Where is it? I demanded. They all stood still. Damn it, if the tub is outside and breached, then we are screwed. Dave spoke up. Gina, if 62 is outside the gates, open and leaking, then we have a big problem. It would be the reason why the clams are out there. Carlton threw his walkie, as it squelched in the corner of the dock, echoing everywhere. Carlton shouted over it. We couldn't hear him. Thurman walked over to it and ripped the battery cell out of the noisemaker. The clams and the flies. This is why they are here. Carlton bellowed while kicking the bay doors. Enough with the noise. Carlton, let's get on the roof and look around, I shouted. The kicking stopped and the two of us took to the stairs. On the roof was a widow's walk, fenced in with a tarp overhead. I hadn't been up in months. I had forgotten about the view, the nasty pond, the hazy sky, the filthy quiet roads, the croaks of bullfrogs, the thick layer of bird shit on the handrails. Carlton put on his sunglasses and spun the stationary telescope towards the beach. What do you see? I pushed. Hold on. What color tub was 62? He muttered, glasses flush with the scope. I thought a second, then pulled the folded up chart out of my breast pocket. Yellow, I answered. He backed away from the scope and motioned for me to look. The west side of the pond, he sighed. There it was, in the water surrounded by dozens of Ipswich. I stormed down the stairs with him in tow. Back at the loading dock, I briefed the group. I don't want to know whose responsibility 62 is, but it's in the water, I said sternly. It is the reason for the clams, the scofflies, and whatever else is out there. How did such a heavy tub get in the water? Asked Kyria. Dave stepped into the center of the group. I imagine it was left outside the gates and either rolled or was moved by the weather. These past storms have been awful. Those storms were weeks ago, I stated, taking his place in the center. Remember the security breach that we all assumed was a system glitch? Asked Truman. What if it was a real break-in? What if someone knows we are here, took it, dumped it, ran? The only people who know that we're here is Steve and Dr. Lupus, said Carlton. Set up the video link. Dave, this isn't gonna be fun. Chapter 15, The Doctor and the Puppet and Their Secret. Aspen and Carlton had devised a plan to overthrow the government. Dave, Maxwell, and I had no idea what the scheme was, but we were all in, no matter what. That strident attitude is very hard to justify now, but 3 years ago it was all we could think about. Carlton knew how to hack into a bank and Aspen had the technology to do so. Originally we were hired by Dr. Lupus, an acquaintance of Carlton's. Lupus is tall, fat, dark-skinned, middle-aged. When he spoke it sounded like a car over gravel. I have only interacted with him over video link, but I swear I could smell his pipe tobacco lingering around me. He was pushy and demanding and full of empty promises. He wore a dim green aura, meaning he couldn't be trusted. Lupus's partner was Steve Jackson. His big head and freckles made him look like that weird TV puppet from 100 years ago. He complimented everything I did with a wide smile, one that showed his rotting gums, and included my name in every sentence when he spoke to me. Gina, you look as radiant as the day we met. Gina, how is it that you can stay so pretty while locked up in a dirty warehouse? Gina, you're the smart one. I'd much prefer to do business with you over Dave any day. Gina, that black cloud over Steve's head meant he was digging his own grave deeper with each lie he told. I'm sure the video link showed just how uncomfortable I was whenever we spoke. I'm also sure that it made him want to creep me out even more. All of the claims he made about preferring me over Dave was bullshit. He wouldn't talk to me about business and refused to mention money if I was even in the room. I was a woman and I'm sure he held that against me. Typical, and in the end made total sense. They hired us to steal money from mega church bank accounts in order to fund their research. We took $100,000 each day from frozen accounts belonging to the deceased and timer evangelists and transferred it to multiple shadow accounts that Lupus held around the world. Our cut of the crime came to us weekly at 10%, a nice and traceable amount of money for us to fund whatever it was we wanted to do. Overthrow the government, or maybe just leave the country. Lupus and Jackson got scared that someone was going to find out. They made us work a front, shipping and storing what they called enhanced hydro, pushing containers and tubs from one warehouse to another, accepting money from unknown shadows, and selling them to local and international companies looking for this magical water. It could somehow produce enough energy to power a fortress. The whole scam was running smoothly, although Maxwell and I were afraid that it could fall on us at any time. Maxwell left in the night. He left a note on his bed. I'm off to New York. If all goes well, I'll be back a changed man. No one knew what that meant and we weren't shocked that he split on us. He had this theory that humans had begun evolving at a faster pace over the past 30 years and that a major breakthrough was upon us. We rarely listened, but Dr. Lupus did. He was intrigued by Maxwell's absurdity and invited him to New York and promised him a role in the testing. He vowed not to do it, citing that we were being ripped off and set up somehow. Maxwell was a paranoid weirdo, but he ended up being spot on. When I was a kid, my uncle, Shellman, was an outed scientist. People of science hid their identities and even faked their own deaths. Some of them were actually killed because they were basically hunted by the government and churches. There had been attacks on science for years, but no one felt unsafe. When prominent AI programmers and trailblazing astrophysicists started disappearing, rumors spread that the church, also known as Suicide Cult, had paid the police to lock them up or ship them to a camp. No one ever backed up these claims, but no one denied them either. Uncle Shell left in the night with a note on his bed. Like Maxwell, I was so young that my only memory of it was my father crying. I wasn't told of the contents of the note, but the running story in my family is that Uncle Shell left for Canada. He was a biologist working on renewable power sources made of biological material. The lab that he worked at was experimenting with aquatic life forms and bacteria in hopes to create energy that was easy to farm and free to provide. Knowing this nation's history of destroying solutions that it cannot profit from, Shell knew he had to run or he'd be taken. It wasn't until last month when I found out what my uncle was doing that fueled his paranoia. Carlton and Dave called me into the break room to show me what they found on the hard drive. "What is your uncle's last name?" Dave asked. "Cupid, same as mine." Dave opened a new search window. "Cupid Shellman." I silently panned the data on the screen. It showed his stats. DOB, no date of death, last known location, Toronto, Canada. On the third page, the term, invest infest, littered the screen. "Dave, what is that?" "Search it," darted Carlton. "Invest, infest, enhanced hydro," read Dave. "Wait, he worked on the shit that we are selling," I spouted. Dave read on. "Operations and research cut off. Specimen redirected to Mount Cotton, the mega church," I said, pointing at the search window, then the keyboard. Dave kept typing. "Oh no," said Carlton gravely. "They bought the upswitch and let it loose on us. Cotton and its cult spun this whole thing into action." Carlton slumped down in his chair. "Set up the video link." "Dave, I need to tell Lupus." "Wait," I interrupted. "Have you searched those guys since you installed the drive?" Dave and Carlton look at each other. "You didn't even think to check them out, did you?" I said, crossing my arms. "Lupus, Roland, brother of God, no threat. Jackson, Stephen, brother of God, no threat." The Brothers of God led the mass suicide. They formed the Mount Cotton megachurches, produced the message that drained millions of Americans' wallets, and allegedly brought them all up to heaven. All but Lupus and Jackson. This is why they hired us to empty the church's accounts. The money was frozen since all the Brothers of God are dead. They couldn't just withdraw the funds themselves. They wouldn't have authorization, explained Carlton, and they'd get arrested for genocide, I added. Carlton stood up. "Go make me some apple juice. I'm taking every last cent from these bastards." Carlton nudged Dave from the keyboard. "Tell the kids to get inside. I want to talk to them."
Chapter 18, Acid Pony. I lost my Thurman yesterday. He was the baby of the team, age 17, 2 years younger than me. He was a sweet boy, brave but reckless sometimes. Skinny and blonde, he looked just like a famous skateboarder from decades ago. When the doors wouldn't close, Thurman stepped out to budge them. This is something that we never do alone. It was getting dark and the scouse flies had been circling around the area looking for veins. These flies are large and they suck your blood 1,000 times more than any mosquito. Thurman was pushing on the jammed door for 10 minutes. That's all it took to turn him into a bloodless corpse. From what Gina said she saw on the surveillance camera, 10 flies attacked Thurman at once. He had no chance. Those horrible flies are about 6 inches long and 2 inches wide. Their heads have a long thick needle in the front and a tail in the back that is just as sharp. They turn from beige to red within seconds of drawing blood. Their heads look like they have human features, camouflage that shows teeth and a smile and beady black eyes. They whistle as they fly through the sky like an incoming arrow. When you shoot or squish a live one, the blood never stops flooding out. I don't go outside in the summer. I want it. I'm not Thurman. David found his body. Parts of his head and both of his eyes were gone. His toes were broken and his arms torn to Swiss. We couldn't bring him into the building for fear of contamination. Sometimes those flies carry malaria and other foul things, and since the Ipswich breakout last week we've become even more wary. David simply shut the door on Thurman and said, "Good night, Thurman Masser. Forgive me for not burying you." In the morning the body was no more. I refused to look. I like him. He and I had shared hundreds of hours together moving this and assembling that. We got to know each other well. We were close in age and had similar upbringings. He was a runaway who fled from Washington State when his parents went off to die for Jesus. His aunt took him in, but he feared for his life after he caught her selling his things to buy guns. "If it ever comes to war, leave no witnesses," she would say. Thurman left at age 12 and wandered around until he made it to Palance. He had formed a drug habit and did some truly awful things just to stay high and able to walk to the next trick. It was Gina who helped him clean up and David who trained him at the compound. I'm not sure how those two are taking it, and I don't want to ask. I don't want them to know about the affair we had or about the things we did when we were pissed at the new state and at our superiors. I certainly didn't want to have to tell David and Gina about the suicidal thoughts that immediately filled my mind. I know that a severe wave of dread will pour over me and publicly make a sloppy fool out of me. He meant a lot to me. I wrote his name on the wall near where he died. I wrote his name on some barrels in the boardroom desk. He died doing something he shouldn't have done alone, and I hate him for it. 3 days after Thurman's death had passed and I was still hush. I didn't know how to feel, so I dropped some LSD. He and I traveled together for a few days before finding the compound. During those few days he and I would trip every day. I found a sheet of the stuff in an abandoned hippie house in Cheshire. We had no idea where we were off to, but the acid got us there. I locked my door and tried to relax. I opened up our journey journal and started leafing through the pages of the nonsense we wrote while high. This was titled, Mosaicon. I wrote it last week. There was a living patch of fungus at my feet. It danced and then spoke. It kept me awake all night. It was cherry red. I never said a thing because I knew someone would take a hard line on it. "I am not Thurman," I told the fungus. It replied, "You were his acid pony." I was. I went in a spin for hours. Thurman made me. Dick spoke. Old men bathed, and girls lied to me. I only saw dirt. Everything I had to clear my thoughts was locked away in Thurman's coat. It all moved like the alphabet soup I ate as a kid. The fungus assured me it was okay to cry. My shirt is now soaked. There never was a lie. We knew that the barrels contained the end of it all. We just knew we had to do something. All of ours died all over the country because of these clams. We knew that they were made in a lab and not from China. Must take a hard reaction. By saying yes with me, certainty. I think it is a cloud hiding the letters in the warped floor underfoot. I heard a murder, a gaggle. My wet bed. I thought all bets were off. I thought the mask was on. The child knew nothing. There was no reason to scare her. She was fun and free-willed. Something we never see. If I could dig my fingers into this soup and pull teeth I would, but right now it's useless. The jelly looks like a friend, and that friend is you.
Chapter 24, A Changed Man. It has been 15 years since I saw any of them. When we outed Jackson and the doctor as embezzling frauds and chemical weapons dealers, we decided to split. I went to Toronto, Gina to San Francisco, and Kyria went with her. Carlton went to find Aspen, and from what I understand they took off to Mexico. America was still a mess, but out of New York and New England came a new authority. They're called New Birth Resistance, but no one refers to them as that. SSDD is what I call it. I've been more apathetic of what becomes of my native country. Canada survived everything that crashed America, and I feel safe here. I'm alone in every respect. No one at home, no one in bed. The agreement was to split the Brothers of God money up evenly between us, with a separate account for Maxwell if we ever find him. Carlton was able to grab $5 million from Lupus and Jackson's shadow banks before we tipped off the New York State Attorney General that money has never been sought after, and I think no one will ever find it. I basically have more money than I need. One a clear day, which is rarer than you'd hope, I walk to the park. There's always some jackass mime or balloon girl there wowing the kids and annoying the teenagers. Yesterday was no different. I got a beer, a joint, and a sandwich and cut down to my usual spot. The Mind Balloon Club was nowhere to be seen. I found that odd. I finished my sandwich and strolled to the pond. There was a group of people huddled around a big willow tree. I listened in to hear gasps and oodles as I opened my beard and headed over. I saw the shape of a man blinking in and out of sight like he was transitioning from one dimension to another, some real science fiction type action. He disappeared quickly, followed by maniacal laughing. I didn't know what to think, so I just sat on a boulder near the tree and sipped my beer. The laughter carried on. It seemed incredibly familiar, but I didn't care to dwell on it. The people were getting restless and the kids chanted, old man, come back." "Okay," floated a voice from behind the tree. "Here I am." When the old man stepped out from under the willow, he raised his hand to show that he was still with us. The waiting, the watching, everything had all of us stuck in motion. He claimed to be able to change shape through thought and vanish to another space whenever he liked. This was fine with me. I didn't believe it. It was amusing to see someone try to pull some old vaudeville out of his hat. It mimicked the routine that Espen would pull off when I was a kid. Fun and pathetically old man at the same time. I looked around me as he walked towards the group. The faces were shocked, the eyes open wide and the mouths gaping. I wondered what they saw, so I continued to stare. The shape of the man came into focus as he approached. His bushy eyebrows were suddenly gone. His teeth were missing. His head was now bald. I couldn't believe it. This old fool could actually change his appearance. The old man smiled, looking right at me. He pointed and laughed. "You knew it was going to happen someday, Davy." He pushed his forefinger into my chest. The group crowded around me. "You thought this was an act, didn't you?" He smiled. "You didn't believe him?" They all cried. "Me," I squeaked. "What the hell is going on here? I don't know this person." He laughed, poking me again. "Davy, oh Davy," he sang. I looked at him and squinted. "Maxwell, really? Is that you?" I asked him, puzzled with my mouth wide. "I saw it all of it, my friend. All of it," he cried. The group gasped collectively. "Davy, walk back to the cove with me. Let's go. Leave these people to their own follies." I tossed my bottle and lit my joint. If this is really Maxwell, then this day just got exciting. I don't have the energy for exciting. Maxwell extended his knobby hand. I pushed it away and started to walk to the edge of the park. "This is too much for me, man," I said, keeping eye contact with the approaching fence. "You have to start at the beginning and then I'll do the same." Ha ha ha. I have seen it all and now look what I can do. Look, I kept walking, looking ahead. Max's voice sounded younger. The unwashed socks smell had lifted. I turned to face him. His face had changed again. He looked as he did the day he left us. I cocked my head to the side like a puzzled dog. "Do you believe me now?" He smiled. "Believe what?" "I have no idea what has happened. This is the craziest thing I have ever seen," I said, holding my hands to my chest. "Remember when I told you I was leaving on a scientific journey and you told me I was insane? I remember calling you some new age hippie idiot. Then you left in the night." I scoured. "Well, Davy, hippie or not, the journey has changed me, over and over and over again." "So how many faces do you have now?" I asked sarcastically. "You have seen them all, my boy," he explained. "Can you stop addressing me like I am much younger than you? You're only 5 years older. I need to keep up appearances." "David," he walked ahead of me and spun around, waving his hands in the air. His eyes turned from blue to black. I looked back at the willow he emerged from. The people were still looking around as if they thought they'd spot another old wizard in the tree. We approached the gate and left the park, turning onto the dirt road. "You're taking this very well," he said. "Max, I have no idea what to think about this. It sure is nuts that you are a changeling now, but I have to keep my head on and focus on why you're here, alive and cheerful." I puffed on my joint. "A changeling? Yes. That is me now." He crouched down and appeared again with a new face, white teeth, baby dimples, blue hair, looking like a creep. He spun again. "Hippie," I muttered under my breath. We kept walking. I was waiting for him to tell me what exactly happened to him. When Dr. Lupus claimed that Maxwell never made it to him, we assumed he was long gone, dead or just gone. "You've really put on some weight, my boy." Max laughed and smacked my gut. "Did you choose to look like an asshole, or did the Dangerling gods run out of—" "They are scientists." "Not gods, scientists," he interrupted. I stopped walking and looked at him. His shiny teeth blinded me. Although his face was different, his Cheshire grin was still a part of him. "Scientists? From where? I put my hands on his shoulders and shook him. No one has called themselves a scientist in decades. Spill it, Max. Spill it. Max pushed me away and walked ahead on the road. He stuck his hands behind his back and strolled slowly with his nose in the air. They are from Galveston. I met them in New York. Galveston had been underwater for almost 40 years. Every southern storm had to make a stop in that city just to prove a point. Somewhere along the line we all screw this planet and Mother Nature is smacking us back, he sang. They lived in a submarine city, he said. They kept all of their data alive. They had a vast printed library. They had security. No one knew they were there. How did Texas not know they were there? I pushed. Texas stopped caring about the coast long before Galveston was evacuated. They have no eyes over there. They don't even care about them wetbacks no more. Max's Texan accent came out. These guys were off the radar. Texas is fucking stupid, my boy noted. But what were they doing in New York and how are they still alive? I asked. Well, with your favorite brothers of God pretty much extinct, this group haven't had any problems. They've been working on new energy and feeding everyone. He stopped strolling and turned to me. They have the it switch. He grinned. My jaw dropped. Max nodded. They've bred those things without the venom and have turned it into energy. With 1,000 questions I wanted to ask, the only thing I could say was, are Lupus and Jackson dead? Oh, God yes. I saw it go down. Executed by the NWR in Buffalo. He grimaced. It was ugly. I wiped my brow. I started to feel faint. I felt a memory coming on. Dave, Max grabbed me before I hit the ground. Are you having an episode? I nodded, although I wasn't quite sure. The images flashing before me were not short blips. It was an action. An underwater door was opening and letting the flowers into a body of water. The flower was released upon us. I stammered. It was on purpose. Max helped me stand straight and looked me in the eyes. I know, he whispered. We just assumed that was the truth. When we caught on to the doctor's plan and alerted the NBW, we were just going off a very heavy assumption. I know the whole story. I saw Aspen before he died. He put his arm around me and changed his face back to his own. Dead. I teared up. I saw Carlton, too. He was with Gina and her girlfriend, Kyria, in San Fran. How come no one has contacted me? What is going on? Girlfriend? I shook my head. They don't know where you are, Dave, and apparently you were a real dick when you left.
End of book.